This is a Fox News alert. President Trump holding a wide-ranging impromptu news conference as he was departing for a trip to Texas, touching on everything from the DNC Clinton investigations to his conversation with the widow of a fallen soldier. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. President Trump also commenting on the tension with the two outgoing Republican senators, Jeff Flake and Bob Corker. Take a listen.
He did the smart thing for himself. This way he can get out somewhat gracefully. I hope Bob, and I really believe that Bob Corker is going to do the right thing.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts was there, and he joins me live. John, what do you think?
Dana, good afternoon to you. When he said that Corker is going to do the right thing, he was talking about tax reform. He also dismissed Flake's criticism, saying that when he first heard about Flake and he wrote the book about him, he said to his campaign advisors, well, I take it he's a Democrat, and then he was told he was a Republican. Flake, of course, yesterday went off on the president, standing up in the Senate to denounce his uncivil tone, saying it was reckless, undignified, outrageous. The president was asked if he thought he needed to be more civil. He said that he thinks that the press makes him out to be less civil than he is. He repeated the fact that he went to an Ivy League college, that he's a very intelligent person, and that he believes that he is more civil than he is given credit for. The president also weighed in for the first time publicly on the revelations that the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee at least funded in part that so-called unverified dossier that was put together by that former British spy, as well as Fusion GPS. Let's listen to what the president said on that front.
Hillary Clinton always denied it. The Democrats always denied it. And now only because it's going to come out in a court case, they said, yes, they did it. They admitted it. And they're embarrassed by it. But I think it's a disgrace. It's just really it's a very sad commentary on politics in this country.
You told me last week you thought that the uranium sale to Russia was one of the big stories of the decade. 3 congressional committees are now looking at that. We haven't heard you comment on it since those investigations were launched.
Well, I think the uranium sale to Russia and the way it was done, so underhanded, with tremendous amounts of money being passed, I actually think that's Watergate modern age.
So the president there weighing in on the 2 Russian scandals, the uranium deal, and that was the sale of 20% of America's uranium reserves to a company that is controlled by the Russian government, as well as now the news that the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign at least partially paid for that dodgy dossier, as is known. The president also weighed in on the call that he made to the widow of Sergeant David Johnson, who was one of the 4 soldiers who was killed in Niger now 3 weeks ago. The president said that he had a very nice call with her, and that he called her husband David right from the very beginning, which contradicts what Maisha Johnson said, was that the president did not refer to him by name. Dana?
All right, John, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here with us today.
You bet.
All right. We have President Trump also addressing questions about the investigation into Russian election tampering. Take a listen.
This was the Democrats coming up with an excuse for losing an election. They lost it by a lot. They didn't know what to say, so they made up the whole Russia hoax. Now it's turning out that the hoax is turned around, and you look at what's happened with Russia, and you look at the uranium deal, and you look at the fake dossier, so that's all turned around.
So we're just getting that sound from President Trump last hour. Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel joins me now. Thank you for being here with us today. We have breaking news
Always
in this hour all the time. So if you're going to be here, you're going to have to talk about the breaking news. Well, what do you think about these revelations reported last night that the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign in somewhat paid for this Russian dossier that was put together? It's somewhat discredited, but it is the subject of a lot of speculation.
I think this is incredibly concerning that the DNC and the Clinton campaign funded this Fusion GPS through a third party. They touted this fake Russia dossier through Washington, tried to push it into news outlets. It ended up being the basis of some of the Comey investigation. They never owned up to the fact that they were behind it. They've lied about it. Now they're playing hot potato. We need to get to the bottom of why they did this, how they funded it. And there's a lot of questions that need to be answered by the Clinton campaign and the DNC.
Well, and I think that they're going to have to be forced to answer them now because it's all out in the open, and the media is certainly wanting answers because for many months they were told something different by those campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, as the head of the RNC, we do opposition research. We send it out to media outlets, and we send it out. We want it to get picked up, but I don't do it through a third-party organization, hide it, try and push it as if it's a real dossier. I mean, this was campaign fodder that they were pushing as legitimate intelligence against President Trump.
Except for that, Ronna, they didn't actually use it. So I'm wondering if they actually either didn't believe it or they were concerned about it.
Well, somebody was pushing it, and Fusion GPS, the two heads of Fusion GPS have now pleaded the fifth. There's a lot of questions to this. The one thing they did do consistently is deny that they funded it, and now that's come out with these new revelations.
Speaker Ryan actually just talked about this as well. Let's take a listen to him real quick.
It's really frustrating. We've had these document requests with the administration and the FBI in particular for a long time, and they've been stonewalling. The FBI and the Justice Department needs to give Congress the documents it's been requesting, and they need to do so immediately.
The current DNC head, Tom Perez, says he had nothing to do with it. Do you think that will fly?
Well, I think it's a game of hot potato. Who had something to do with it? We need to get those answers, and he should be wanting them as much as anybody. It really tests the validity of how much the Democrats want to get to the bottom of Russia's interference or in this election. Because when it comes to them, when it comes to the DNC, when it comes to Hillary Clinton, they don't seem to have that same appetite as when it comes to this witch hunt against President Trump.
Also, President Trump took some questions today about Senators Corker and Flake, two senators who yesterday got in some tussles with him. I noticed today that he didn't really take the bait in order to advance the story. Let's listen to Jeff Flake earlier.
It is clear at this moment that a traditional conservative who believes in limited government and free markets, who is devoted to free trade, who is pro-immigration, has a narrower and narrower path to nomination in the Republican Party, the party that has so long defined itself by its belief in those things.
Now, that said, President Trump said that he thinks that both men will actually end up voting for tax reform in particular. He just said that at that press conference. As the chair of the RNC, do you think there's still room for these traditional types of Republicans or establishment types that are, right, at least for those two, leaving the party or leaving the Senate?
I think there's room for every type of conservative, and I have to say, President Trump is a traditional Republican. He came to my state of Michigan. He talked about cutting taxes, about limiting government, about deregulation. These are Republican ideals, and he has exemplified them as the president. So I don't agree with this this narrative that he's not a traditional Republican. But what I will say is, at the end of the day, our purpose will unite us as a party, and we are fighting for the American people who have been left behind under the Obama administration, and people are hurting. And we're going to cut taxes, and we're going to fix health care, and we're going to get the things moving on behalf of the American people that they need.
Yeah, it is interesting because even President Trump said that these senators actually vote with me 92% or so of the time. I'm going to turn to something else because you're the chairwoman. You're smoking the DNC when it comes to fundraising. Let's take a look at some of these numbers. The RNC raised $10.8 million in September, $104 million since the start of the year, and the DNC only $4.8. I mean, that's a huge difference. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I'm a mom from Michigan. We can get things done. No, it's great. It shows the power of the president's message. It's resonating with small dollar donors. We have
Is that where a lot of it's coming
enthusiasm. A lot of it's small dollar. It's a third direct mail, third online, and then a third big dollar donors. That's always been kind of the composition. But we're hitting the ground running. We're putting those resources in our battleground states toward 2018. And
are you concerned that some of the House members are not able to match the Democratic opponents for their individual fundraising? Does that worry you?
Yeah, you know, the House numbers that came out were a little skewed because it had $31 million from John Ossoff in there. So we've been on par with the NRCC and the DCCC. We're doing a great job at the Republican Party, and the RNC has 11 times the cash on hand as the DNC. That means resources on the ground to build an infrastructure towards winning in 2018. We're right on track, and we have a president leading the way.
Well, there's another test coming up for you in just about 2 weeks. There will be, well, it's not your test, but there's a test for the Republican Party and the DNC. Looking at the Virginia's governor's race, we actually have a poll showing that Ralph Northam at 49% and Ed Gillespie at 42%. They both say that the race is close. Yesterday, there was a flyer that was issued by the Virginia Democratic Party linking Ed Gillespie as a white supremacist, if you look at this ad, and also saying this is a chance for Virginia voters to stand up to hate. What do you think of that, and do you think the Democrats are going down the wrong path here and actually hurting their cause?
Well, I think the Democrat Party is doubling down on divisiveness and rhetoric that brings people apart instead of bringing people together. Ed Gillespie is running a totally uplifting campaign. He's talking about the Commonwealth of Virginia. He's talking about jobs and wages. He's working hard. It is a tight race. It's a state that President Obama won and Hillary Clinton won. And Ed Gillespie is neck and neck right now. We're hoping we can pull this out and make him the next governor of Virginia.
If he doesn't win, do you think that is a referendum about things to come in 2018?
Yeah, I don't look at these off-year elections as any bellwether. I think, especially governor's races, they're really specific to the states that they're representing, or the Commonwealth in this case that they're representing.
Yes, well, Virginia and New Jersey always throw us off in these off-year elections. So, Ronna McDaniel, thank you for being here. Appreciate your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
So the politics of tax reform with a new threat from a handful of Republicans, plus what Democrats think a tax reform failure will mean for them in the midterms, and new information on the ambush that left 4 American soldiers dead in Niger, and as another widow of a fallen hero speaks out what she wants everyone to know about her husband.
I know that I married a true hero. When you have true moral integrity and you care that much for other people, that you're willing to put your life on the line, you're a hero.
A Fox News alert, President Trump addressing the controversy over the phone call he made to the widow of LaDavid Johnson, one of the U.S. soldiers killed in Niger. She said the president struggled to remember her husband's name, but the president said that was not the case.
I was really nice to her. I respect her. I respect her family. I certainly respect LaDavid, who I, by the way, called LaDavid right from the beginning. Just so you understand, they put a chart in front. LaDavid says LaDavid Johnson.
Meantime, we are learning more about what sparked the deadly ambush, with word that a villager may have tipped off ISIS-linked militants about American and Nigerian forces in the area. A senior defense official explaining that the Army Green Berets and about 30 Nigerian forces had stopped off in a village north of Niger's capital right before the attack. They were getting food and water after a reconnaissance mission, and right after they left, 50 heavily armed fighters ambushed them. Now, another widow of a U.S. soldier killed in Niger is now speaking out, revealing what she wants to know about the deadly ambush and sharing her feelings about President Trump. Trace Gallagher went to Fort Bragg to interview her, and he joins me now live from Fayetteville. Trace.
And Dana, it's kind of amazing how different families have different takes on what the president meant when he called them. The first thing I asked Michelle Black was about her boys, her 9 and 11-year-old sons, and she said that they're coping, but it really is her first priority is to make sure that they are emotionally and physically okay. She also wants her husband remembered more than just a special forces. She says that he was a great athlete, he was a master chess player, and that he actually learned to speak 3 languages, including the local dialect on the ground in Niger, which kind of made him a local celebrity, if you will. But she said more than anything, he was really a great husband and father. Listen to her.
I know that I married a true hero, whether it would have been on the battlefield or just in life in general. When you have true moral integrity and you care that much for other people, that you're willing to put your life on the line, you're a hero, whether it's over there or here.
She also talked about the other families that were involved in this. You know, the military is a very tight-knit community, and as hard as it was, as heartbreaking as it was for her to lose her husband, she said as she heard the names of the other soldiers killed, she said it was just agonizing because she knows their wives and their children. As far as the investigation goes, the military is giving her guidance, right? They're keeping her up to speed, but she's not really watching the news hour by hour and day by day. She's not following it because she says Right now, it's not going to bring her husband back. Eventually, she will want the answers exactly what happened in Niger. And we talked about the president earlier, but she says that she's aware of the controversy of President Trump's conversation with the other Gold Star wife, but for her, it was a totally different experience. Here she is. So you're satisfied?
I'm satisfied. Yeah, I'm very grateful that he called and he spoke to the kids, and I think just the excitement from that made it a little better, even if it was just for a minute. So, yeah, he was very gracious, and I appreciate anyone who calls, because, like I said, that takes quite a bit of bravery to call into that kind of situation.
I mean, really kind of going back to her boys, saying, look, if you can just lift them up for even a moment during this time of crisis for them, it really was well worth it to her to get that phone call, and a lot of other outpouring in love from people she doesn't know from around the country.
I'm glad you went, Trace. Thanks so much for bringing that story to us.
Sure.
All right. Moments ago, President Trump saying Republicans are united on tax reform.
I called it a love fest. It was almost a love fest. Maybe it was a love fest. But we get standing ovations. There is great unity.
But some on Capitol Hill are warning they may fight the tax overhaul. Our political panel will weigh in next. Plans for a major tax overhaul are hitting a snag in the House. Some Republicans now threatening to vote against the 2018 budget. They want party leaders to back off from plans to get rid of a key federal deduction. Lawmakers must pass the budget before moving to tax reform. Let's bring in our panel. Joe Trippi is a former campaign manager for Howard Dean and a Fox News contributor. Greg Mueller is the president of CRC Public Relations and a former communications director to Steve Forbes and Pat Buchanan. So, Greg, here they go again. Are there going to be some possible roadblocks to getting the budget done, which means they'll have a hard time getting to tax reform?
I think at the end of the day, Dana, no. I think the Republicans realize right now that they must get something big done after the election, the massive election that they just won a year ago. So I think a lot of this is talk and banner and positioning right now, but I think all eyes are focused on passing a serious, simple and fair tax reform, give the American people the tax cuts that they campaigned on, deliver on that, and I think we'll get back to the budget. Don't forget, after Kennedy cut taxes, after Reagan cut taxes, after Bush cut taxes, we had economic growth and revenue poured into the government. That's how you get to spending reform. But I think right now it's a preliminary positioning on that, and I think we'll come back to it. But I think tax reforms is what's going to unite the Republican Party, and I think they'll deliver at the end of the day. I predict by the end of the year, I also predict that some Democrats will go the old way of Jack Kennedy and maybe even come on board or face peril in the 2018 elections.
What do you think of that, Joe Trippi? Do you think Democrats will have to say, you know, why are we going to stand in the way of tax reform?
I don't know if there'll be Democrats there or not. Depends on what the final package looks like. But I do think the Republicans are going to find that this is a lot tougher, given their caucus and the Senate, than they think, or that the president thinks. I mean, again, you've got deficit hawks who are not going to countenance on the Republican side, going to countenance driving the deficit up with with certain of these measures that they're suggesting, and then you've got these deductions that would help offset that with the state, you know, by knocking out.
Yeah, and some of these high tax states, right, and a lot of them in the Northeast are also in California. That you've got a lot of members of Congress who are saying, I don't think that we can do that, but they have to pay for it some way. Let's listen to President Trump. He said that they're much more united as a party than the Democrats. Let's listen.
No, not at all. No.
They should be.
We have a very good relationship. Honestly, when you take a look at what's happened with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and the hatred and the division and the animosity, I'll tell you what, honestly, the Republicans are very, very well united.
The Republicans' disunity, or like seeming disunity, is on full display every day, Greg. I try to get to the story about the Democrats, but there's always news breaking about Republicans, sort of the disposition of the president bothering them, and so they've decided either to not run for re-election or to speak out against him. But do you think they're actually more united when it comes to the policy?
I do. I think the Republicans are much more united on policy, and I think they're getting results. If you take a look at the economy right now, we've got 3% growth. Remember, we were told that we were never going to get to that. The new normal under Obama was 1.8 to 2%. Wow, we busted 3% in less than a year with a Republican government. I also think you're going to see more unity around the tax reform debate. That's more of an issue. There was unity on judges. There's unity on Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch. There's a lot of unity there. And frankly, I think the Democrat Party has got a lot of division that doesn't get reported. I think Bernie care and a lot of these issues that are coming forward are dividing Democrats, and now they're trying to kick pro-life candidates out of their own party. So there's a lot of division there that I don't think gets reported, frankly.
In fact, we won't play the soundbite, Joe, because I don't have that much time, but the president was talking about how there's still this, well, I think he said hatred between the Bernie bros and the Hillary Clinton side of the party. And is that actually going to hurt you guys from coming together to try to fight back against the one thing you all agree on, which is, anti-Trump, anti-Republican?
Well, I mean, Trump is the great unifier on the Democratic side, just as Obama was, frankly, across the divisions on the GOP side. And we saw that with the Tea Party and the establishment. And that party, some of that fight's still going on today on the GOP side. I think, it's going to continue in the Democratic Party. Most of those kind of divisions just don't get solved until a presidential election, till 2020, but I think in 2018 there'll be primaries. I think generational fight, ideological fight within the party, but in the end, in November of 2018, I think the party will be pretty well unified. They'll put those divisions aside to fight, basically to fight
but that
Trump.
Generational fight certainly playing itself out in California. So Greg Mueller and Joe Trippi, thank you for being here today. We'll
Great
see
to be
you
with
soon.
you.
Okay.
Thanks, Dana.
News that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC helped fund the research behind the anti-Trump dossier. So why did some Democrats deny that for months? Plus, I'll sit down with the Bush twins to talk about their new book, and we'll share a special message from one of their family members that you'll see first here on the Daily Briefing. Fox News confirming that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid for research that led to the so-called Trump dossier. The Democratic National Committee issuing a statement earlier, essentially absolving themselves from it. Ben Shapiro is editor-in-chief of thedailywire.com and host of The Ben Shapiro Show, which I always listen to every day on my way home from work. Ben, thanks for being here today. What do you make of this latest revelation? Because in some ways, I thought we already kind of knew this, but then I realized that the Hillary Clinton campaign had never admitted to actually paying for it.
Yeah, that's the shocking part, because we knew the Democrats were behind the funding for the Steele dossier, at least from April 2016. That had been reported. But the Hillary Clinton campaign had basically denied this. The lawyer for them, a guy named Mark Elias, he had apparently told Maggie Haberman at the New York Times that he had not been behind it, he wasn't aware of it. And now she was tweeting out that he basically lied to her. So the question really becomes, why would they lie about this? This seems like something really weird to lie about if it's just an Oppo research file that they were funding through their lawyers. And that sort of stuff happens in campaigns all the time. And that's what makes you suspicious. Just as with everything else with the Clintons, every time they try to cover something up, it makes it about 10 times more suspicious than it might have been if we had just known about the underlying facts.
So this all gets mushed into the Mueller probe, and we'll see how that turns out. Let me turn to Senator Jeff Flake, and I think that we'll leave Senator Corker aside for a moment, because you wrote some pieces last night that I thought were really interesting, some tweets, and also in the commentary this morning, that it wasn't just that he was going to lose, it's that he'd been unpopular for a while. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the narratives that I think the media are trotting out, and everybody sort of has a stake in perpetuating a narrative that I think is false. The narrative is that Jeff Flake is some sort of tragic martyr at the altar of Trumpism, that Trump ousted him, that Breitbart ousted him, and that it was his opposition as a principled man to Trump that really got him thrown out here. The fact is that Jeff Flake, since 2013, has been one of the most unpopular senators in the Senate. I mean, there was an article in The Atlantic titled, "Why is Jeff Flake the most unpopular senator in the United States Senate?" In 2013, he had moved dramatically to the left in his time in the Senate from where he had been in Congress, and he was already running a very competitive primary with Kelly Ward, even in the middle of the election cycle. And then it seems over the past few months he's decided that he wants to set himself up really as the sort of avatar for anti-Trumpism inside the Republican Party. And I found the whole thing to be in a little bit of bad faith. Not that I think his opposition to Trump is insincere. I think it probably is very sincere. It's just the perpetuation of this myth that he's going down because he opposes Trump. I think that gives very little credit to the public, and I think it gives very little credit to Jeff Flake's own mistakes.
Well, they're going to be there, and they're going to be there for these votes. Let's listen to President Trump, whether he's concerned about Flake and Corker blocking tax reform.
Are you concerned that Flake and Corker could block your agenda, tax reform?
I don't think they do that. I really know that they want tax cuts. They know we need it. We need it for the country. We need it for the people. We need it for the middle class. We need it for jobs. I don't think they do that. I really don't. I know them well enough. I don't know Flake very well, but I know Bob Corker. I think they really would do it. I think they feel they have to do it for the country.
My instincts is that that's probably true. What do you think?
I think that's probably true as well. He better hope so, because at this point, President Trump has attacked somewhere from 6 to 8 Republican senators, right? I mean, he's gone personally after Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Rand Paul, Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. Like, half the Senate has been on Trump's hit list. So if all of them are so personally alienated, they'll never vote with Trump again, then he's never going to get anything passed. I think that there is more policy unity than there's unity about President Trump. But again, all he needs is for 3 Republican senators to peel off, and he loses the majority for anything.
This week you wrote a column, Does Character Still Matter? This was a column you wrote in National Review. What was your conclusion?
And basically what I was saying is that character certainly matters in high office, but not for the reasons people think it does. That we, as the American people, in order for us to have any sort of unity, we have to have trust in one another, that we have certain basic principles that we hold sacrosanct. And character is about holding those principles sacrosanct even when you are going to personally take a hit. So George W. Bush took serious hits from Cindy Sheehan, but he constantly expressed respect for her status as a Gold Star family member. I contrasted that with President Trump going after a Gold Star family member this week. It's really not about the political back and forth as much as it is about the fact that if we don't have anything in common anymore, if there's no sacred space that we all share, then the country is going to fall apart. And that's why character needs to be still held as a value.
Mike Allen wrote that Corker is right. Republicans in private cringe at the thought of President Trump, but it's meaningless if they publicly bow to him, routinely vote for him, and never condemn him. This is the story of the moment and the first 9 months. With few accomplishments, countless petty GOP fights and slights, Trump is strong as ever. Do you agree?
No, I don't think that's really true. Again, what does the left expect? They think the Republican senators are going to start voting with Democrats because they don't like Trump personally. We have to separate off Trump's policy, at least in governing terms, from his personality. A lot of people cringe, I'm sure, in D.C. at his personality for reasons both good and bad. But when it comes to the policy fights, Republicans are going to vote Republican because they're Republicans, presumably.
Presumably. All right, Ben Shapiro, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
A show of force by the U.S. military with a 3rd Navy aircraft carrier entering the Western Pacific, the USS Nimitz, joining the Roosevelt and Reagan, emphasizing military readiness against any threats from North Korea. This comes just days ahead of President Trump's first trip to Asia. Benjamin Hall joins now live from London. Benjamin, what could this buildup of naval power actually mean?
Yeah, hi, Dana. I mean, it is certainly a powerful show of force, and I suppose it's aimed at 2 main principles. The first is showing North Korea that all options remain on the table when dealing with them. The other, though, is a signal to the rest of the world that it is the U.S. which remains the predominant naval military power in the Pacific. The USS Nimitz joined the USS Roosevelt and the USS Reagan in the Pacific just today. The ships, crucially, are equipped with the Aegis anti-missile system, which the US sees as one of the key defense mechanisms against any possible attack by North Korea. Meanwhile, North Korea continues to provoke. Japan's defense minister saying that the rogue state's nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities had now grown to an unprecedented, critical and imminent level. So this is a real show of force at a time when tensions in the region just keep bubbling up.
So, Benjamin, is this show of force aimed at other countries too, maybe like China?
Yeah, absolutely. China will be watching this very, very closely, and it comes at a time when they are also flexing their military and naval muscles. The country has just come off the end of its every 5-year major Communist Party conference, in which President Xi effectively consolidated his power over that country and reaffirmed his notion that China was the major growing superpower in the world. China, of course, has been building fortifications on islands and reefs in the South China Sea and upgrading its own naval fleet with new warships, including a 2nd aircraft carrier, which was launched just earlier this year. So just a week before President Trump goes on his first visit to Asia, this is a sign not only to China and North Korea, but to the world that the U.S. has a major role to play here, and that when he comes, he's certainly going to be playing hardball, trying to reach a conclusion to the North Korean issue. Dana?
Indeed. Okay, Benjamin Hall, thank you so much. So do you remember this moment? The whole Bush family from the president's first inauguration over 15 years ago. And now the twins, Jenna and Barbara, join me live in studio on their book, Their Life Inside the White House and Their Father's Decision to Enter the Iraq War, plus much more. Looking beautiful as always. Life in the political spotlight is never easy, but imagine being a teenager while your father is the leader of the free world. That's exactly what my next two guests lived through. Barbara Bush and Jenna Bush Hager were teens when their dad became president in 2001, and they wrote about their experiences in a new book titled Sisters First, Stories from Our Wild and Wonderful Life. And both Barbara and Jenna join me now. The book is great. It is laugh out loud funny, and there are also moments when, of course, I would tear up. And I've sort of watched you guys go through this as teens, but I learned a lot about your early childhood as well. So, Barbara, who did you think about when you were writing this book? Who do you want to read it?
Well, I hope everyone will read it. But really, when Jenna and I decided to write it, we were writing it for a female audience. We realize how lucky we are to have a person in our life that is our partner in everything we do and loves us for who we are and believes that we're enough. And I hope that every woman has that, whether it's a blood sister or a sister that is a friend, especially given sort of the state of how women are portrayed these days, wanting to make sure that we're lifting women up in every way.
I had a feeling, Jenna, that dads of daughters should read this book.
Yeah, that's so funny. I just said that to my cousin. He said, should I read this? And I said, you're raising 3 girls. You should read it. Yeah. And I'm not sure why, but I just said that.
Well, because I feel like your parents and grandparents loved you unconditionally, and you're raised in a very unusual environment, including, tell us a story about Spiky.
Oh my gosh, Spiky is my stuffed animal that I had gotten at the circus with my grandfather. And when we were living in D.C. for 1 year, when my grandfather was running for president, our grandparents would babysit us. So Jenna and I were spending the night with them one night. Little did we know, our grandfather was debating Michael Dukakis the next day for the presidential election. And I lost Spiky, who was my white tiger. And my grandfather hunted around the vice president's house and the grounds with Secret Servicemen with flashlights to find Spiky before me. And the next morning he was found behind some curtains. But of course our grandfather would do that for us to make sure that we were...
and you write that your grandfather never reminded you that he was president, that he didn't want you to be impressed with titles. And so, Jenna, how has that served you as an adult?
Yeah, well, I think people will say to Barbara and me all the time, y'all are so normal, which I think is a compliment, you know?
Yes, I think it's a compliment.
They're like, you're so normal. And I think that's because our parents wanted us to realize what mattered, which was family and faith and service. And they never said it, you know, they just showed it. And so we knew that. We weren't necessarily impressed with titles or fame. We just want to use our voice to do good.
One of the things I loved about, I remember being on Marine One once, and we were going to Camp David, and it was the fall, and I was sitting just behind you all, and I was watching, and the president could make you laugh and your mom laugh just with a look. Yeah. And so how important was humor, dealing with all of that, especially with all the criticism that's coming, how he could still make you laugh?
Yes, well, I mean, our family uses humor in all tense situations. We love to laugh, and my dad is hilarious, and his favorite subject is himself. He's extremely self-deprecating, which makes everything a lot lighter. We certainly know not to take ourselves too seriously, and we write about in the book a number of things.
Yeah, what is the bumper sticker?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't say it. You can say it about
I know. I'm like, find the book and you can read it.
Well, yeah, buy the book.
Yes, you can buy the book, but it's pretty funny about some village in Texas missing somebody. That's right.
And it was, we presumed it was our father.
I think we have this clip from the other night, the hurricane relief concert. If we have this, I wanted to ask if you can figure out what your dad was saying. Do we have that?
Disaster, but can be a new beginning if we just do what we ought to do and prove that the heart of America, without regard to race or religion or political party.
All right, so what I loved about that is that the president obviously says something to Barack Obama, who is trying so hard not to laugh, but then the president has to look at him like, did you get the joke?
Yeah, we know what he said, but we can't tell you.
Oh, really? You do? Is it not in the book?
No, it's not in the book. Well, but maybe we'll do a postscript.
Yeah, for the paperback.
Yes, exactly.
Jenna, you talked about, in the book, you talk about sort of fake news, before fake news was popular in 2016 as a concept, or labeled that way. Is there anything that you would tell your 19-year-old self that you've learned in dealing with all of it now? You're a mother of 2 daughters yourself.
Well, no, I mean, we write about, there are some hilarious things that were written about us, but I think the best gift our parents gave us was the gift of making mistakes, of allowing us to make mistakes. We weren't expected to be perfect, and Lord knows we weren't. But as a mom now, I'm like, thank goodness. I don't know if I could raise two girls if I was expected to be perfect. We were allowed to make mistakes, and that, even though our dad was president, I mean, they wanted us to grow and to learn. And I don't think that president children should be expected to be perfect. I don't think that's fair. And so luckily our parents didn't either.
Is the White House haunted?
Oh, yeah.
It is.
The White House is haunted. Did you have any experiences?
No. I was just haunted by my own self-worth and thinking that I could have done a lot better. Let's take a listen. We had one of your special family members send a message. Do we have that here?
Good luck, Jenna and Barbara. Big week. World Series, baseball, and you're bringing out your book. Good luck to you. I love you both very much.
What? That's so awesome,
sweet.
Dana.
Thank you.
She's pretty amazing, and you all turned out to be these amazing women that are doing this. Global Health Corps. You have to check into Global Health Corps that Barbara has started right after college. And now, what's the situation with it now? How big is it?
Well, now we've worked with about 900 exceptional young leaders who are solving health issues in the United States and in East and Southern Africa as well. And we see a world where these 900 and thousands of others of young people will be in positions of power to solve global health issues throughout their lives.
And you've written previous books, but Jenna, you are in the public eye as well. Did you ever anticipate that you would be in media?
No. Did you ever anticipate that I would be in media?
Well, that one time you stuck your tongue out.
Seems like
at the motorcade. Yeah.
Seems like I wouldn't go into the
I thought you had it in you.
No, I didn't at all. But I think that's another wonderful thing about life is that you can't predict how life is going to go. And I love my job. I think it's a privilege to tell people's stories, so I'm liking what I'm doing.
Well, you're certainly beloved too. I mean, you hear it everywhere. That it's interesting. I love watching the Obama girls grow up, and I know that you have a relationship with them as well. Have you talked to them about this book?
No, we
haven't. No.
Oh, put that on your to-do list.
Yes, exactly. When we have time.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. I really loved the book. It's coming out. It's 2 weeks, 2 shopping months until Christmas today. So
buy it
this
for
would
your
be.
Sisters.
I would buy it for your sisters, but honestly, I do think that grandfathers and dads of daughters or granddaughters would really benefit from reading it as well.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dana.
Dana.
And thank you for the surprise from our Ganny. That
You're
made our
welcome.
day.
You can call her on your way out.
Yes.
All right, Barbara Bush and Jenna Bush Hager, thank you so much. All right, the Cuban government responding to U.S. claims that a sonic weapon was used against American diplomats in the Caribbean island nation. A live report next. Thousands of travelers to the U.S. could soon have to endure long lines before boarding flights. 5 airlines will soon implement additional screening at check-in. A 6th will follow in January. So back in March, Homeland Security banned carry-on laptops on flights from 10 airports in the Middle East and North Africa. This new procedure could impact as many as 2,100 flights into the U.S. on any given day. The Cuban government now pushing back on claims that a sonic weapon was used against American diplomats in Havana. According to reports, top Cuban security officials are calling the claims, quote, science fiction and slander. Steve Harrigan is live from our Miami bureau with more. They're finally talking, Steve.
Dana, they are talking and they're very angry. They're pushing back hard against these claims that they carried out so-called sonic attacks against U.S. diplomats in Havana. Cuban officials say they don't even have the technology to carry out such techniques. They said they carried out an exhaustive investigation using more than 2,000 experts, even taking air and water samples in the area where the attack supposedly occurred, interviewing more than 300 people. They say there is no evidence of any such attacks. Now, once these attacks became public knowledge after August, the U.S. took some stern actions. 24 U.S. diplomats were actually diagnosed with physical problems, some of them loss of hearing, but some much more serious with neurological damage. So the U.S. cut its diplomatic staff in Cuba by more than 60%. They also sent home 15 Cuban diplomats. Now, initially, the State Department did not directly blame Cuba for these sonic attacks. They said Cuba was simply responsible for the safety of U.S. diplomats on Cuban soil. But in recent days, this has heated up, with President Trump taking a more direct approach, saying Cuba is indeed responsible for these attacks. That drew the backlash from Cuban officials today. Dana, back to you.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. So a question, can you put a price on happiness? Albert Einstein did not think so. His simple advice for a happy life up next.
So when Albert Einstein writes a few words from a deep thought of his heart, what is the secret of happy living? This is something that interests everyone and can talk to everyone.
And now some good news. It turns out money can buy happiness. Albert Einstein's theory of happiness just sold at auction. He wrote it in 1922. In one of his notes, he said, quote, "A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness." According to the auction house, Einstein gave his notes to a hotel messenger in lieu of a tip. The note sold for more than $1.5 million. President Trump will sit down with Lou Dobbs tonight on Fox Business Network. He will share his thoughts on NAFTA, the Trump dossier, and the media. You can catch it at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dana Perino, and you know what's next? It's Shepard Smith.